Good evening. You're watching the main news on HKIBC. I'm Joanna Ho. Here's a look at tonight's top stories. COVID infects 2 more children who are now under intensive care. John Lee warns of community COVID transmissions as he meets citizens. And the Peak Tram hits the track again after an upgrade. Another 2 children are in intensive care in hospital after contracting COVID. This came as new cases in Hong Kong remained above 8,000. Janice Low reports.
A 17-month-old boy was admitted to Princess Margaret Hospital with fever and convulsions yesterday after getting his first COVID jab. He then developed croup, an infection of the upper airways. The convulsions and croup were treated with medication. Health officials said 2 infectious disease experts concluded that the infant was infected before receiving the jab.
Both of them agreed that the symptoms should be caused by the viral infections of the COVID-19. And there was no documentation or no history that the COVID vaccine can give rise to COVID. It is very likely that the patient got the infection before the vaccination. So both of them confirmed that the cause is the COVID-19 infection. It's not related to the vaccine.
A 10-year-old was also admitted to the Children's Intensive Care Unit of Princess Margaret Hospital. He had a high fever and breathing difficulty after contracting COVID. Both boys are in serious condition but are conscious. Health officials also said private hospitals have provided over 300 beds for non-COVID patients to free up more space in public hospitals. As of yesterday evening, private hospitals admitted 220 patients from the public sector. The city logged 8,457 COVID infections today, including 232 imported cases. Hospitals admitted another 357 patients, taking the tally to 2,387, with 12 in intensive care. 4 more people died from COVID. Janice Low, HKIBC.
A health expert says the decision to tighten social distancing measures is aimed at reducing the risk of complications and deaths from COVID.
I think that, of course, yes, if we restrict our social movement, if we restrict our social gatherings, etc., it's not something that any of us actually would like to have. But the important thing is the more of these social gatherings, the higher the risk there will be in catching the infection and also passing the infection on to those who are vulnerable.
Lau did not give a direct answer when asked if the government should take tougher action if daily caseloads hit 10,000. But he said whatever measures are adopted, they should be introduced slowly to protect vulnerable people. Chief Executive John Lee says the recent rise in the number of government officials contracting COVID shows that transmissions have increased in the community. His statement came on his 2nd district consultation for his maiden policy address. John Lee was joined by 12 principal officials when he met over 100 representatives from Kowloon and Hong Kong districts at the Southern District Government Primary School in Ap Lei Chau this afternoon. The contingent included the city's number 2 Eric Chan, financial chief Paul Chan, and his deputy Michael Wong. Topics raised included urban redevelopment, education, and rights for ethnic minorities. The chief executive said the Culture, Sports and Tourism Bureau will beef up efforts to promote sports development. Meeting the press later, Lee said the recent rise in the number of government officials contracting COVID showed that transmission has increased in the community. He was asked whether the situation would affect plans on reopening the border with the mainland and if social distancing measures would be tightened again.
I'm very conscious of the need of maintaining connectivity with both the mainland and the international world. As I manage to ensure the public health system can function to deal with the threat of the epidemic, and there is a good protection of high-risk group, then my strategy is to allow society to have their social, economic, and normal activities as much as possible.
Lee also urged private hospitals to be more proactive in taking in patients from public hospitals. A suicide prevention group has found that the percentage of elderly people who took their own lives in 2021 was the highest in almost half a century. There were about 1,000 suicides last year, and 40% of them were people above 60 years old. The Samaritan Befrienders Hong Kong found that the city's suicide rate last year was slightly higher than between 2017 and 2020. Around 14 people out of every 100,000 took their own lives last year. According to the group's research, those aged above 60 accounted for 40% of around 1,000 suicides in 2021, the highest on record since 1973. Mental health and family issues, such as the death of the spouse, were the main reasons for suicidal thoughts. But the Samaritan Befrienders, also known as SBHK, say elderly people are usually reluctant to seek help.
They just don't want to burden other people. It's kind of a culture of our Chinese people, not to burden the younger generation. Normally the people in the East, you have in their minds that is a kind of taboo, especially about life and death. It's death, in an exact way.
The group urged relatives and friends of senior citizens to watch out for warning signs, including changes in their daily routine, such as suddenly stopping visits to parks and complaining more about their physical health.
They don't even talk to kids about their emotional problem. They only always tell about their physical health problem. But then, the physical health problem, they kind of reflect that they also have mental health problems.
Zhang urged families and friends to pay more attention to the mental health of the elderly, and he called on the government to beef up emotional and medical assistance for them. Overseas, Pakistan is seeking at least $160 million in international aid for flood relief. The government disclosed that more than 1,000 people have died since mid-June, when the country was hit by flash floods triggered by monsoon rains. Thousands more people suffered various injuries or fall prey to diseases. With more rains expected in coming days, officials are trying to help those whose homes were swept away earlier. The displaced people have found temporary shelter, but have little food, fresh water, and medicines. U.S. stock indices plunged overnight after a warning that interest rates will keep rising as the de facto central bank is determined to lower runaway inflation.
Restoring price stability will take some time and requires using our tools forcefully to bring demand and supply into better balance. Reducing inflation is likely to require a sustained period of below-trend growth. While higher interest rates, slower growth, and softer labor market conditions will bring down inflation, they will also bring some pain to households and businesses. These are the unfortunate costs of reducing inflation. But a failure to restore price stability would mean far greater pain.
Inflation in the United States is at a 4-decade high of 8.5%. Powell admitted that this is a major problem for lower-income families who struggle to make ends meet. Higher interest rates could lead to a recession as employers cut jobs, but the Fed insists that its target is to conquer inflation. An air raid has hit a kindergarten in the northern Ethiopian region of Tigray, killing 4 people, including 2 children. Homes in the capital Mekelle were also struck. Tigrayan officials said the attack was launched by the Ethiopian government, which is battling rebel forces. The United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, condemned the raid and urged all parties to end hostilities. The World Health Organization has described the situation in Tigray as the worst disaster on Earth. The iconic Peak Tram is back in service after closing for over a year for an upgrade. Hundreds of enthusiasts arrived early, hoping to take the first ride on the new-look tram this morning. Joanna Ho reports.
Despite the mercury hitting 34 degrees Celsius, people queued to take their first ride on the 6th generation Peak Tram. This followed a year-long makeover for one of Hong Kong's oldest forms of transport, changing from its classic burgundy to green. This man, who last took the tram during the 1970s, decided to pay his second visit today to reminisce the past, although the ticket today costs far more than when he had his first ride. It now costs $88 for an adult return ticket. Some fans rushed to the counter to check out the newly designed ticket. But this lady decided to take her time to appreciate the tram's new look before getting on. The upgraded tram also allows passengers to enjoy a better view as the windows are wider and the ceilings are changed to sunroofs. With a stairs-free design, it allows the elderly to get on easily. It was this woman's 3rd time taking the Peak Tram, but her first after she has to use a walking aid. Passengers on the first ride were rewarded with souvenirs. At almost 11:15, the tram finally hit the track. It only takes around 7 minutes for the tram to reach its destination, but passengers made full use of the short period to snap as many photos as possible, hoping to capture the historic moment as well as their excitement. Joanna Ho, HKIBC.
On to the weather now. It will be very hot tomorrow with the mercury hitting 34 degrees. The hot weather will continue until Monday. Now let's take a look at the weather around the world. That's our main news for Saturday night. Join us for more news at 11. I'm Joanna Ho. Good night.